Okay, good afternoon, everyone. And I'm Yufeng Lin from Tech. So I'm going to talk about some recent work on reconstruction of three-dimensional cold flow from satellite data. So this work was mainly done by PhD students Yufeng Lin and in collaboration with Professor K.K. Zhang. So we know that the Earth's magnetic field is generated in the liquid outcrop through the dynamo action. So actually, the dynamo theory has been proposed and studied for a long time, but we still don't understand quite well how the geodynamo is exactly operating in the outcrop. So over the last 3 decades, so numerical simulations of geodynamo have advanced our understanding of this process. But still, it's a very challenge. It's a huge challenge to reach the realistic parameter regime for the geodynamo. So on the other hand, so we have very rich observation from the Earth's magnetic field. So we have observation from both ground and from satellite. So it's in particular over the past two decades. So the low Earth orbit satellite have been continuously monitoring the Earth's magnetic field variations. And the variation of the Earth's magnetic field is caused by the fluid dynamics in the Arctic pole. So in principle, we can use these observations to constrain the core dynamics. So the key question is how to do that. So broadly speaking, so there have been two approaches to do that. So the first I call the kinematic approach. So this is simply based on the magnetic induction equations. So if we can neglect the magnetic diffusion, which is the case for the Earth's core, so we get this simple frozen flux approximation. We can see that the Earth's magnetic field, the magnetic field and its time derivative are directly related to the Earth's core flow. However, because we can only extrapolate the observed field at the command boundary, so we can only solve this equation at the command boundary. So we can only get this the core flow at the core surface. So it's just a two-dimensional core flow. So another approach is the so-called geomagnetic data assimilation, which has been introduced in the field over the past decades. So the data assimilation framework, basically you can incorporate observation to the fully 3D MHD dynamo equations. So in principle, we can reconstruct the whole three-dimensional core dynamics from the observation, and we can even make prediction of this magnetic field evolution. But this is still very challenging. The problem is first, the observed field is only a very small fraction of the whole core dynamics. And more importantly, so I don't think we have fairly realistic geodynamo model to assimilate the realistic data. So here we use intermediary approach. So as Professor K.K. Zhang has mentioned that the main challenge is very demanding to solve two Navier-Stokes equation, but from these both theoretic considerations and the numerical simulations, we know that the leading odd force balance for this problem for the Earth's core dynamics is rotationally dominated flow. So if we just consider the leading odd force balance, so we get these simplified equations. And these equations support the eigenmode solution, which are known as the inertial modes. And luckily, we have very elegant analytical solution for this problem in a sphere. So the idea is that we can expand the core flow into a linear combination of the different inertial modes. And then we plug this into the magnetic induction equations. And if we have the observation for the dB, dt, and B, we can reconstruct, so the inverse problem becomes to solve the coefficient of this inertial mode. Okay, this idea is not new, actually. It was first introduced by Chris Finney's team at DTU in 2019. But there are two key differences in our approach and with Chris Finney's approach. So one is the criteria for the selection of the inertial mode. So each inertial mode can be labeled by MNK. So M is the azimuthal wave number, and N is kind of the axial wave number along the rotation axis. And the K is the, roughly speaking, it's the wave number in the cylindrical radius direction. So here our tracking is K at M to 10, and we only take the N equals 1. So that's basically we just choose the slowest inertial mode. So it's quite a quasi-geostrophic mode. And so we use only 220 inertial modes in comparison to the 4,000 inertial modes used by Chris and his colleagues. So actually, our choice of inertial modes is based on the two experiments use the synthetic data from dynamo simulation. And we found that if we use too much inertial modes, you can get a better fit of the circular variation at the core surface, but you lose the kind of the constraint in the bulk of the flow. So another difference is that the inversion scheme. So here we use the so-called the PINN. So that's the neural network schemes. So as I said, so the whole inverse problem becomes to get this coefficient of the inertial mode. So basically we construct neural networks which describe the temporal variations of this coefficient, inertial mode coefficient. So basically what you do is you train these neural networks. So basically this sigma pyramids. You train these pyramids and to find optimal neural networks which satisfies the physics constraint on the right hand and also the observation if the observation is available. So that's our inversion scheme. So use this approach, we can get the coefficient of the inertial mode because the inertial mode is three-dimensional. So in principle, we can get both the co-surface flow and use the coefficient of the inertial mode to reconstruct the three-dimensional co-flow. So here is two experiments use the synthetic data from dynamo simulations. So this is, so of course this simulation is use the moderate Ekman number, but still it generate Earth-like dipole-dominated magnetic field. So actually, so we use this K-square, which is introduced by Christians to characterize the Earth-like dynamo model. So if it is smaller than 4, it's quite Earth-like. Because in the synthetic test, we know the true state of this three-dimensional co-flow, so we can compare the true flow with the inverted flow. So on the top is the true flow, and the bottom shows the inverted co-flow. So we can see that we fairly well reconstructed the large-scale. So the inverted co-flow. So basically get the large scale structure of the co-flow compared to the real one. So on the left actually is the azimuthal flow in the equatorial plane. So both in the equatorial plane and at the co-surface. And to quantitatively characterize how well we retrieve the co-flow, we introduce this correlation coefficient. So basically, it's a correlation between the true states and the inverted flow. So we can see that at least in the out part of the core, so we get a relatively good correlation coefficient. It's larger than 0.6. Actually, for the Yufeng, we can reach somehow like 0.8. So that's, I would say, quite reasonable to get a large-scale structure of the core flow. So now let's move to the real data. So actually, our colleagues have shown this preliminary data from the Macau satellite. And use this data and combine the swarm data, we can get a preliminary core field. But for the core dynamic inversion, we are interested here. The most important things we need the circular variation of the core field or the time derivative of the core field. And for that, we don't have from the short period of time of the Macau satellite. So we use the Cal7 model predicted circular variation. So that's the preliminary results. So that's the core flow. So it's what you would generally see from the core flow inversion. So that's the core flow at the surface. That's two-dimensional, and you can see that we get some similar results as previous study. So you have the strong azimuthal flow in the Atlantic hemisphere and quite weak flow in the Pacific hemisphere, and also have this high latitude jet. Because as I said, so we get the as long as we get the coefficient of the inertial modes, and we can reconstruct this three-dimensional flow in the outer core. And this is the reconstructed three-dimensional flow. So the three components, we can in the so here this is the equatorial plane. From the equatorial plane, actually we can see this small-scale convective flow. And the flow in the meridional plane is mainly geostrophic, because the inertial modes we use are mainly quasi-geostrophic inertial modes. So to give you a more intuitive flow structure, so here we show the three-dimensional streamline. It's clear enough. Probably you can look at this screen. So you can see this three-dimensional streamline of the core flow. And we can see it's a very clear east-west asymmetry of the core flow. So in the Atlantic hemisphere, we get this. So it's basically dominated by a large-scale azimuthal flow, which returns back to the Pacific at high latitude. And in the Pacific hemisphere, we see this very interesting helicic. It looks like the conventional, you see the general cartoon picture you see for the convective cell in a rotating regime. And this is a small-scale convective cells. And this is quite different dynamics. So if we look at from the, so directly look down from the North Pole, and we see this well-low eccentric giants. So this the solar flow in the Atlantic hemisphere and return to the high latitude. And actually this high latitude jet is, the position is coincident with this the so-called tangent ceiling. And actually, apart from these large-scale giants, we also see some small, relatively small-scale vortex inside. Actually, and in the Pacific hemisphere, we see this convective, relatively small-scale convective cells. And finally, I would like to say that. So there are also some similar structure from the geodynamic simulation. So that this picture are taken from a recent review paper by Chris Finney and colleagues. And this dynamic simulation, I guess, is from the so-called coupled Earth system. And you can see that there's some quite similar flow structure from this simulation and from our inverted core flow. So I personally, I think we get a relatively reasonable three-dimensional core flow use this approach. Of course, this is a very preliminary results. So I will leave summary here and yes, to save time. Okay, that's all I would like to say. Thank you.